When excavating the Caelian Hill in Rome, under the Church of San Clemente, an altar dedicated to Hercules was discovered. On this altar, carved in stone, there was a dedication made not by senators or the emperor, but by common workers, the workers of the imperial Roman mint. On this massive block of stone, we can read the names of the men that worked at the mint, all clumped together. This wonderful find offers us an intimate glimpse of the people who actually struck the coins during Emperor Trajan's reign. Coins like the ones you have in your screen now, a direct link from what is in our collections to very real, once living, breathing Romans. Now, how absurdly cool is that? I mean, for once we're not looking at the emperor's portrait or grand inscriptions, but simply at the names of ordinary men who worked with hammer and die to turn lumps of metal into the currency of the Roman Empire. You know, small stuff. This altar and other inscriptions from the early 2nd century AD found next to it have given scholars a unique chance to reconstruct the hierarchy, the daily life of the Roman mint during the Golden Age of Rome. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. How did an ancient Roman mint operate? How many people worked there? How did they organize themselves? Was there a hierarchy? Well, let's get started and let me show you. So we need to understand we're talking about a specific moment in time. The physical location of the mint within the city of Rome, its organization, it all changed a lot from the Republic to the early and the late Empire. During Trajan's time, the mint was a carefully organized imperial institution. The days of the Republican Tres Viri Monetales, the young aristocrats who once supervised coinage and put their initials on the coins, these times were long gone. Now the mint answered directly to the emperor, forming part of his wider financial apparatus that ensured coins were produced on a massive scale. Let's also remember the Mint of Rome was just one in a network of mints all over the empire's territories. But for the sake of simplicity, we will just analyze how the Rome mint worked, as it's the one we have direct evidence from. And just so we have a chronological anchor to what we will be talking about today, this altar is dated to the reign of Trajan, so that would be between 98 and 117 AD, so right at the very end of the 1st century AD and the beginning of the 2nd century, Trajan being the second of the famous 5 good emperors, which many consider to have been the golden age of Rome. And this week's episode is kindly sponsored by L5, the new online marketplace for ancient coins. L5 is a platform that focuses on trust, transparency, and low fees. It is an environment where you can safely buy coins to add to your collection, knowing every item listed has been vetted by specialists, with a lifetime guarantee of authenticity, and the new system of online bidding that ensures fair, transparent bidding. No sniping, no shield bids, just a fair trading environment for buyers and sellers. L5's proposal is to eliminate all uncertainties beginners and experienced collectors alike might have when buying a coin, while offering a low-cost service with no listing fees and a buyer's premium of just 5%. Make sure to check out L5.com for what I believe is a new platform that the ancient coin market was in need for. This altar to Hercules gives us a snapshot of the types of workers it had. The men who placed the blanks, struck the coins, oversaw quality control. This altar in particular is just one of the finds at this massive site, and it's probably the most important one, but our knowledge of how the mint works, it's actually a bit of a puzzle. It comes from a combination of the interpretation of this altar with other inscriptions found on the site, and with just the overall study of coins themselves and the application of what we could call as like a kind of numismatic reverse engineering, which allows us to piece together with a relative level of certainty how the mint operated and the coins were made. One of the key figures we learn about that is mentioned on multiple inscriptions in the site is a gentleman called Felix. Felix was a freedman of Emperor Trajan. His title was that of, that's a long one, Optio et Exactor auri argenti et aeris, which translates to the overseer of the production of coins in gold, silver, and bronze. Felix was an important man at the mint itself, but even he was merely part of a chain of command that reached all the way up to the heart of imperial administration. Above him stood the procurator monetae, a high-ranking financial officer, likely an equestrian, at least an equestrian, maybe it was a senatorial rank, who supervised the mint as part of the state treasury. The procurator's job was to ensure that the mint met the needs of the empire, that enough coinage was produced for the legions depending on demand at any given time. So, for example, we know in fact that the mint of Rome operated very actively during Trajan's reign due to the number of wars he waged. He also ordered the issue of coins for public distribution via the payments of state expenses. Think about construction workers that had to be paid, anyone the state would hire to do some kind of work. And he also tried to ensure the adequate number of coins, like physical number of coins, were in circulation, because this was what allowed trade to operate. Above the procurator, higher up the hierarchy, was the procurator a rationibus. He was like the chief financial secretary of the emperor. The a rationibus oversaw all revenues, expenses, and accounts for the empire at large. We could think of his work as the one of like a finance minister. In the system, Felix was at least like the third place in rank. He was kind of like the man on the ground, the workshop boss, translating the orders from these high-ranking officials into like the actual production of the mint. Now, there's an interesting question here. Felix was a freedman. Why was a freedman, a former slave, placed in such a position of trust? The answer lies in this really fascinating nature of the imperial household. Under the emperors, the imperial household, the Familia Caesaris, was not just the personal retinue of the emperor, but it was also this highly efficient administrative engine running parallel to the formal Roman state bureaucracy. Imagine a body of highly capable, elite advisors and secretaries entirely dedicated to the emperor. For these roles, freedmen were often chosen because their loyalty to the emperor was, well, it was absolute. Having been former slaves of the imperial family, they owed everything, their status, their wealth. These people very closely connected to the emperor, they were wealthy. And of course, their very freedom, they owed all of that to the emperor. They were in a way isolated political actors from the power dynamics of Rome. They had no ties to the senatorial elite and the senatorial elite that could potentially be plotting against the emperor. So they were, in short, the perfect executive agents. Many were highly trained in logistics, accounting, and other highly specialized skills during their years of servitude. After all, the emperor was the richest and most powerful man in Rome, so of course he could afford and have priority of access to the slaves with the very best skills available. And these slaves, once freed, they made for very competent and loyal employees for the imperial family. So now we know the importance of these freedmen, but as for the division of labors at the mint itself, the author shows freedmen and slaves were employed. Low-level administrative tasks and the overseeing of the operations was done by the officinatores, 25 in total, according to a separate author dedicated exclusively by them. A number of them were designated to individual workshops called officina. The mint operated multiple officina at the same time. Next, we have the signatores, literally stampers. They were responsible for aligning and pressing the 2 dice against the disc that would soon become a coin. During the striking process. Then we have the suppostores. They were the ones who placed the coin blanks onto the anvil die, probably with the help of some thongs as the flants were heated up before striking. And finally, we have the maliatores. These were the ones who delivered the hammer blow on the dice, imprinting the design on the blank and transforming those blanks into actual finished coins. The author lists 63 workers, half of them freedmen half-slaves. The actual balance between slaves and freedmen reflects a structured division of labor, with freedmen often in the more skilled or the roles related to overseeing the whole activity, and slaves performing the heavy manual work. The choice of Hercules as the patron deity in this altar for these lower level workers also makes perfect sense. After all, Hercules was that super strong demigod, very fitting for men who would be doing hard manual labor all day, every day. Counting the number of all low-level laborers, supervisors, as well as Felix, the big boss, and his assistant, we come to a total of 90 people. This might have been the full staff or only the people who contributed to commissioning these altars, but it's clear from the sheer number of workers that it was quite a sizable mint. If we consider indirect workers, people who didn't work at the mint but worked to support its operation, we're likely talking about a few hundred people at least. So as we've seen, the production was surprisingly organized and complex, with several workstations, the oficina I just mentioned, running simultaneously. We can imagine the workflow: a suppostor setting a prepared blank on the lower die, the signator steadying the upper die, then the malleator swinging a hammer in one swift motion, striking the coin with enough force to imprint both sides of the design. Each team could produce hundreds of coins in a day, but of course this work was exhausting. So to keep the output steady, teams likely rotated shifts throughout the day, which explains, for example, the higher number of malleatores in relation to other positions. Since they were the ones responsible for the hammer blow, these men certainly needed breaks for rest, while another malleator took his place and continued the shift. The preparation of the coin blanks was also crucial. The silver blanks, for example, and that's quite a surprising find, I may add, these were often supplied by external contractors, known as conductores. These men handled the smelting and casting of the metal blanks. These blanks were made with a specific size, a weight, and an alloy, and then they were shipped to the mint for striking, which is highly intriguing to me. I would have imagined something as critical as the preparation of the metal itself, the metal that gave a coin great part of its value, that it would have been produced and controlled locally at the mint. But it seems like it wasn't the case. The only reason for that being, which I can reasonably theorize, it's probably because the mint lacked the space to hold the huge furnaces needed to smelt the raw quantities of precious metal to make these blanks. They probably only had smaller ovens that were used to heat up the blanks right before striking, because, the mint was located right at the center of Rome, so there wasn't a lot of space to build things. However, even with this technical complication, we once again see the emperor's trust placed on his entourage of freedmen, that group of highly trusted ex-slaves I just mentioned, because if we look at the conductores, 4 out of 5 of these men were also former imperial slaves, freed by Trajan. So the emperor wasn't stupid. The blanks might not have been physically made at the mint, but their production, their quality control, and the transportation to the mint was still arranged by highly trusted individuals. So once the blanks were ready and they were delivered to the mint, they were reheated before striking. So it was a way to soften the metal and ensure a clean impression of the design. Quality control must also have been a very serious concern, because mistakes at that moment, they were costly. A coin with a bad weight or illegible legends, they had to be recycled, and that was an expensive process. So supervisors like Felix would have probably inspected batches of coins, checking the weight, the overall appearance, and the designs that were supposed to be shown in each batch. And the quality control can be seen on the coins that reached our days. It was good. Spelling mistakes are very rare on coins of Trajan, which is remarkable considering how Trajan loved to put long legends on his coins, so the likelihood of mistakes was there, but they seem to be rare. And the weight of coins of all metals fall within a remarkably tight margin from their official weight. As for making the designs that are going to be placed on the coins themselves, the men who engraved the dies were known as sculptores. Sometimes the term quelatores was also used. These were specialized artisans who created the negative images of the emperor's portrait, the legends, and the reverse motifs on hardened bronze dies. While we don't have the names of individual die engravers from Trajan's reign, the fact they were not included in the altar to Hercules shows they probably worked at a separate space, away from the minting of the coins. Although I believe they must have worked within the walls of the mint at least, because dies were very well guarded. Smuggling one out of the mint could allow someone to make counterfeit coins, and in ancient times this generally resulted in the death penalty because the right of making money was a prerogative directly connected to an emperor's right to rule. It was important. The point is, they were considered highly skilled craftsmen, so they were probably very well paid and must have worked in a much cleaner and safer environment compared to the rest of the crew back in the Oficina. After all, their work determined how the emperor's image would be seen by the people, so they had an important role to fill. So as you can see, what's remarkable is how standardized and efficient this system was. Rome's economy under Trajan was vast, and coinage was its lifeblood that allowed trade to flow. The Mint of Rome alone wasn't supposed to produce all coins up to the smallest pocket change for all corners of the empire. There were dozens of local mints that would fill that role, but the imperial monetary standard was still a universal standard used everywhere. And even with a conservative estimate that only like 0.5% of all Roman coins ever produced have survived to our days, we still come to the conclusion that it had to produce millions of coins annually. And the altar to Hercules shows us that it took dozens of workers, carefully coordinated to meet this massive demand. Each person had a specific task, and together they formed this fascinating kind of proto-industrial production line. Maybe it's more like a highly optimized manual assembly line. In fact, there were other mass-produced goods that were made by the Romans, like bricks, pottery in general, bread, flour, and of course coins. All of these had optimized manufacture structures that resembled factory lines that increased its productivity. The numbers of finds of pottery, bricks, and coins is so abundant that it makes us wonder just how close the Romans might have been from industrialization. Only if maybe slave labor wasn't so cheap and abundant, it could have generated the appropriate stimulus for some ingenious Roman to change the course of history. There's also some evidence that the Roman mint had influence beyond the city itself. Silver coins from faraway places like Syria or Cyrenaica from around the reign of Trajan show stylistic links to the dies produced in Rome, suggesting that the imperial mint might have supplied dies that were sent to these locations to be made into coins at their local mints, or Rome might have even struck some provincial coinage, shipping it to its target province for circulation. It's really a crazy reminder of just how centralized the imperial control over the imagery of the emperor and how monetary policy was enforced very tightly. There are, of course, lots of questions we don't have a final answer for. Probably the most pressing one we don't have a final answer to is whether bronze coinage was struck in the same place as gold and silver. Some of the inscriptions found speak only of the moneta auraria meaning related to gold, and moneta argentaria, which is related to silver, which has led some scholars to suspect that bronze coins were maybe made elsewhere or in a separate department. The quality of the portraits of even humble bronze coins, on the other hand, might indicate it was just produced alongside precious metal coins. That's at least my opinion. Now, one of the cool things we know is that gold coins in particular, being the highest value currency, these were struck by smaller, elite teams. You can see this by just the style and the quality of the coins. Gold coin dies are almost always of superior style and their quality is just great. And the production is great. There are few misalignments, dies were changed regularly as the images are always very well imprinted and very sharp. Even on worn coins you can see the coin was well struck with a good relief. On the other hand, silver and bronze coins required a much larger crews to churn out the huge volumes needed for everyday trade. So engravers might have had less time to make portraits, and everyone involved in the striking might have been working on tighter schedules, so the quality of these coins tend to be somewhat inferior, even if the quality of these coins is also still quite excellent, especially when compared to other less prosperous moments of Roman history. Like the coinage struck under Trajan was really top-notch for all of the Roman period. The quality control after the production of gold coins was also superior. The weight of gold coins was measured with a technique called a measurement al pezzo, which means each individual coin was weighted after striking, every single coin, and their weight had to fall within a very small margin from the official weight, while silver and bronze coins were measured al marco, marco meaning the pound, meaning that a standard pound of metal was used to make X number of coins. So for example, at the time of Trajan, a denarius was supposed to weigh 1/96th of a Roman pound, but it was impractical to weight every single coin. So as long as 1 pound of metal was turned into 96 denarii, and all coins fell within a reasonable range of the official weight, give or take a few tenths of a gram, it was approved to be put in circulation. You know, I really need to pay a visit to this altar next time I go to Rome. Imagine that, when you hold one of these coins, you're not just touching a piece of imperial propaganda. You're holding the product of an entire system, a chain of command stretching from the emperor's financial secretaries down to the hammer blow of a magliator, exhausted from a day of work. Just look at this altar, just read their surnames etched in stone. Felix, the big boss overseeing the mint. You can read other names like Apollonius, Postumus, Pomponius, Severus, Sporus, so many names. These were not faceless men buried under the sands of time. They live with us. Their hard work enabled us to have these coins to foster our love of history with these wonderful pieces of ancient metal. So yeah, cheers to these hard-working men. May the fruit of their work continue to inspire numismatists for centuries in the future. So I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the inner workings of a Roman mint. Consider leaving a like and subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon. Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.